Bismillah walhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Pardon the background noise, there is some construction going on, so it may be a little disruptive. I wanted to focus on a reflection which I thought was incredibly rewarding. Imam al-Nawawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, in the book Riyad-Us-Saaliheen, one of the things that he does that a lot of times is not always clarified or understood is that Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi focuses a lot on what we call al-Minhaj al-Mawdu'i. And what we mean by that is that he pursues what we call a thematic education. He takes the ayat of the Quran that are similar to each other in meaning and revolve around a theme, and he puts them together under a particular subject heading, and then along with that he follows up with a series of ahadith. One of the things that I found to be incredibly insightful, especially given our time today, is that he did something else which I didn't pay attention to. And he did something that is very similar to what you find in Bukhari, and that Imam al-Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi will take in his Sahih, and he will have a chapter heading, and that chapter heading will indicate something to the meaning that is in the hadith, or it will concentrate on a point or communicate his position. But sometimes it may not necessarily be clear from the ahadith itself what it is that's being said. And so you find that Imam al-Bukhari will take a position so that the way that he organizes the ahadith and also the way that he entitles them has meaning. Because also what hadith comes first and why did he select the hadith and how did he bring them together, all of that has meaning. And that's why the study of hadith is not just for anyone. It's a process which involves some training. But here in Riyad-Us-Saaliheen, in Babu Nahi an Ida'at al-Mal fi ghayri wajhihi allati adhana al-shar'u fiha, here is the chapter that's entitled The Prohibition of Taking Wealth and Investing it or using it in a manner which is not permissible in the Islamic legislation. That's the title. Now, the hadith, look at what he does for the hadith, which is amazing in my reflection because of what type of insights it gave to me when I think about the current reality that we live in. He uses the hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَرْضَ لَكُمْ ثَلَاثَةً وَيُكْرِهُ لكم ثلاثة ويرضى لكم أن تعبدوا ولا تشركوا به شيئا وأن تتسموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا ويكره لكم قيل وقال وكثرة السؤال وإضاعة المال. And this narration is noted in Sahih Muslim. And so here is a narration which is from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, who he said that the Messenger of Allah said, Allah is pleased with three things for you. The translation says likes, but that's not a good translation. Allah is pleased with three things for you to undertake. And this proves of three things for you to engage in. He is pleased that you should worship Him exclusively. Right? فَيَرْضَ لَكُمْ أَن تَعْبُدُوا. Right, and here is or ta'budu, right? Here the issue of worship Him exclusively is important, because then what comes next is a clarification on that worship. وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Right, worship Allah solely. That is what gains the pleasure of Allah, and that point is emphasized in the fact of not engaging in the act of shirk. Shirk, that's a discussion in and of itself. But then he follows that up with وَأَن تَقْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Right? And to hold on to the book of Allah together. In the tafsir of the Quran, it also says to hold on to the shahada la ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah together, or iman la ilaha illallah. You know, that is foundational, that we have unity on that foundational point of creed. But it doesn't stop there. He says, وَأَن تَقْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't divide. And we know that this is a matter of a matter of importance in today's time, because of what we see with this unity that has occurred. And it's not a new matter, it's an old matter. But the reality here is that the simplicity of what is being talked about a lot of times is lost in the details, right? And so the issue here that we have is one of Tawhid and one of coming together as a people, as a community. And then that's followed up with an understanding of some of the things that divide or create division. And that's the issue of gossip. That's the issue in engaging in conversations in which you're just talking about people without the goal of Islah. Or you're just mentioning what people are saying, just, opinions. In other words, you're engaged in just opinion reflections. You're not engaged in what is foundational, either acts of ibadah or building the ummah up. You're not engaged in organizing the people. What you're engaged in is a lot of empty conversation and talk. Right? Those are some of the fawaid, or the benefit that came to me in reflecting on the hadith. The other thing is kathrat as-su'al. And this now comes with the skeptical mind, right? That you're in a mental state of skepticism. Things are not clear for you. The last one is extremely important because it says a lot about what goes on, and it changes today's time, and it changes the whole reflection on the hadith for me. And so Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala also dislikes, right, for us, or it is not pleasing to Allah, the misappropriation of wealth, right, the wastage of wealth. And so here, when you think about the whole issue of how people divide in families over material goods, here you think about how institutions and communities and governments engage in the misappropriation of wealth, of using wealth in a way which is not legitimate, and how it is that this divides whole societies. And we see that. That's the biggest debate right now in U.S. politics, the whole issue of the budget, and how is it, what should be in the budget, what shouldn't be in the budget, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But yet, when we look in the past of how things were done and how money was used and how it contributed to breakdown, now we see the whole issue of having to try to repair the damage that was done before. The same thing in our institutions. We see a lot of fighting for power and so on and so forth, and the wastage of money. The genius thing here is that Imam al-Nawawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, he highlighted this point of the chapter of the prohibition of misappropriating or misusage of wealth, of how that leads to division. Because when we start talking about أن تقتسموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا, this is an aspect that comes out for me in the hadith, in reading the hadith, when I look at what it was that Imam al-Nawawi focused on. And then when I look at what are the indications of the hadith, how the hadith is talking about the necessity of unity, and you start to think about what it is that causes disunity, what it is that causes breakdown, what it is that causes corruption. And so the lesson that we get here is the importance of the centrality of having values, the importance of having a reference point for values. That's firstly what we need to understand. At the highest level for us as Muslims is Tawhid, and not to worship other than Allah. But in general, the necessity to have some sort of reference point for value. This can apply to Muslims and non-Muslims. Non-Muslims can benefit from this although they may not believe in the oneness of Allah Ta'ala, they can still benefit from this teaching, the necessity to have a reference point of law that governs what is right and wrong. You know, what determines injustice. Without that, there's a problem. And when you go against that, there's certain values that should be inalienable. And that was at one time in this society something that was dominant, the idea that there's certain rights and certain things that are inalienable. The other issue is the necessity of coming together and working together in unity and not to divide, and what it means when there is division. How does that come about? You know, and so when we don't have proper ideas on the table, when there's a lot of dissension, when there's a lot of skepticism and a lack of trust, and also when the mind is not disciplined, you know what I'm saying, we end up falling into situations which are divisive. And that division can come from the way that we speak on issues and matters and each other, to the way that we think, right? Because when our thinking is not clear, kathrat-as-su'al is a state of mind. You understand what I'm saying? There's a state of mind. You know, there's criticism that we have that is extremely destructive in our community, because a lot of times it's not well placed. That's not to say that criticism doesn't have a role, but a lot of times it's not well placed. And in an environment where there's a lot of he say, she say, and gossip and this, that, and senseless talk, and when there's a lot of criticizing, this opens up to destruction, and it opens up also to people having grudges against each other, and it opens up to the destruction of economy and other things that come along with that, right? Because of the way that we end up operating in our personal lives, we're impacted in our social lives as well. And so those are some basic reflections. Some of them are direct in the hadith and some of them are indirect. But I felt as though that Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, in reading this, it was an eye-opener for me. And that institutionally, we really need to think about also how it is that our values in the institutions, and also how it is that we use money, how it is that we use wealth, how it is that we use talent and skills, how that leads to difference and breakdown, and how it is that is impermissible in the Sharia itself. Everything should have its place and should be that which is opening to good. That should be the direction of how we're moving as an ummah. You know, we should have that mindset, the mindset of growth and development. And when I'm talking about growth and development, I'm not talking about the same concept of growth and development that you find in materialism or in the marketplace. You know, I'm talking about growth spiritually, growth socially with each other, and development where we're building our potentials and we're building our understanding as well as our wealth. But also, all of these things, when you bring them together, are not only the secret to unity, but the secret to power and the wielding of power. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.